Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome back to my channel. And welcome to a very special review for a very special film that's very near and dear to myself. A movie that I never, ever thought that I would ever see myself reviewing or even talking about in any kind of detail on my channel. Hold on. Hello. And yeah, you read the title right. Before we begin, I would like to say a few words regarding this genre. So, um, as I kind of alluded to in my ranking the Harry Potter franchise, now I am a fan of the fantasy genre, like purely fantasy, sword and sorcery, sword and sandals, dragon slaying, wizard dueling, like orcs, elves, and giants and trolls type of fairy tale land. I am a fan of that genre, but I definitely would not say that it's one of my favorites. Fantasy is just not really a genre that I actively find myself like dedicating myself into researching and exploring. Like if there's a movie that comes along and I check it out and it happens to be a fantasy film and I like it, then of course, yeah, I do say, I like that film or I like that series. Excuse me. Of course, there are fantasy films out there that I do really enjoy. Like I like the original the 1930s Wizard of Oz. I do like the Harry Potter series. Clash the Titans, I would say, is a fantasy film, so I do like that film. The original Clash the Titans. What else is there? Like Star Wars is kind of sci-fi fantasy or science fantasy, but it has a lot of fantasy and mystical elements into it. So I do, of course, like Star Wars. Um, but yeah, I'm just not an overly huge fan of the fantasy genre. However, now aside from Harry Potter, there is one series of films that, in my opinion, it reigns as the supreme ruler of the fantasy genre. And nothing before or since these movies have come out has even come close to remotely topping this franchise. And I am, of course, talking about the legendary Lord of the Rings trilogy, directed, of course, by Peter Jackson. This, to me, is the epitome of the fantasy genre. If I was to actively be in a fantasy mood, this is the stuff that I gravitate towards. And this is the stuff that I say, yeah, I want to watch this. If I want to see elves and men and hobbits and orcs fight each other with swords and magic and sorcery and all this is what I want to watch. Nothing before, if it's not that, if it's purely wizards and magic, I'll watch Harry Potter. But these three films, plus the Hobbit movies, are my favorite example of the fantasy genre. And like I said, nothing before or especially since, especially the Lord of the Rings trilogy, has even come close to topping and surpassing the Rings trilogy. So before we begin, my personal history with the Lord of the Rings movies is very near and dear to myself. Now, I have said in the past, and I have alluded to several times in the past, that when I was growing up, I had a very tumultuous relationship with my father. My folks split up when I was around 4 years old. They didn't officially divorce until I was around 7. So I lived with my father just by myself for a couple years before he married my stepmom. I've said this before too. My mother disappeared for a few years. So for a while, it was just me and my dad, and then for a little while, it was me and my stepmom. And growing up, yeah, me and dad had a very rocky, a very tumultuous, and strained relationship. Now, a lot of that was admittedly my fault because for a lot of those years, I was a angst-ridden toddler, an angst-ridden preteen, and an angst-ridden teenager. I was angry at the world. I was angry that my mom left for a while, and I was angry that I wasn't able to live with my mom when she came back into my life. So, and I was a bit of an asshole teenager. I'm not going to deny that. However, a big reason why me and my dad had such a tumultuous relationship is because me and my dad could not be more opposite if we tried. It is easier to list off things that he and I do not have in common than it is to name things that we have in common. My dad likes to watch the news. He likes to fish. He likes to hunt. He likes to camp. Um, he especially likes sports, and I don't. I don't mind camping. I don't mind hunting. I have knives. I have camping and survival gear, so that did rub off on me. But so much of the stuff that I like, Dad either doesn't know about or does not give two shits. Like, Dad doesn't like Godzilla. Dad doesn't really like superhero films. He especially doesn't like Ultraman. He doesn't like horror movies. He doesn't like a lot of the animated films that I like. Um, like 9 out of the 10 interests that I have, my dad despises. And that created a lot of tension between him and I when I was growing up. Because I do think my dad wanted me to, this is typical. This isn't like specifically towards my dad, but I'm sure a lot of people over the years have had strained relationships with their fathers, like especially guys, whom they want their father to be just like a mini version of themselves. Like my dad wanted me to like sports. Oh, horror and metal is here. Yo, horror and metal channel. Um, yeah, my father wanted me to like sports. He wanted me to like fishing. He wanted me to like hunting. And I was just having none of it. I have absolutely no, especially with sports. My dad wanted me to be in wrestling and he wanted me to be in baseball and football. And I was having absolutely none of that. I hate sports. Sports are some of the most boring activities humanity has ever created. So yeah, that would create a lot of tension between him and I while I was growing up. However, it was not all doom and gloom. There was a lot of that, but there wasn't all doom and gloom as I was growing up. My dad and I do like some certain superhero films. Like his favorite superhero actually is Spider-Man. He took me to see Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man movie in theaters back in 2002. Um, he does like Harry Potter. That's one thing him and I also do have in common. I miraculously got him to be a fan of Two and a Half Men and The Big Bang Theory for a good long time. We both like the film The 13th Warrior and Waterworld. Those are two movies that he and I would watch a lot when I was a kid, as well as National Treasure with Nicolas Cage and Van Helsing. And of course, Dad was the one who introduced me in a way to the 1970s Incredible Hulk TV series. Because my dad was born in 1970, and that show was really popular when it came out. So he did grow up watching both the Incredible Hulk and the $6 Million Man. But the number one thing, and I think this probably even he would agree, is the biggest thing that me and my father have in common is that he and I both are fans of the Lord of the Rings films. He, in fact, was the guy who introduced me to the Lord of the Rings franchise. I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty sure he did read the books when he was a kid. And he was actively, oh, Star Wars. He and I both like Star Wars. But he actively was very interested in all three of these films when they were coming out. So this will lead me jumping right into my personal history with the Lord of the Rings. My dad was very interested in these movies when they were coming out, and I can't quite remember specifically the very first time that I ever saw the Fellowship of the Ring, which I should get that out of the way too. So for this review, I will be specifically discussing the first film in the Lord of the Rings films, The Fellowship of the Ring. Happy 25th anniversary to this movie. Not to the month, as we'll find out in just a minute, but it will be turning 25 this year. But yeah, I cannot recall the very first time I saw The Fellowship of the Ring. I do remember my dad got his hands on, this was when DVD was first starting to take off. I do remember this specifically. He got his hands on the DVD of the theatrical cut of The Fellowship of the Ring. But when the extended cuts of these movies were released, he almost immediately ran out and got his hands on each one of these. These aren't the same ones that are like, they're not the ones that my dad owns, but these are the same editions that were released in the early 2000s that my dad immediately ran out and purchased all three of these after also getting the theatrical cuts for all three of these films. But I do specifically remember, I remember seeing the theatrical cut of Fellowship of the Ring. But when he purchased this and we sat down and watched it, he was giddy, of course, because there's extended footage. And I do remember very distinctly seeing all these new and added scenes. So it was like experiencing the film in a very new way for the very first time. And it's because of that experience, and it's because of these releases of the extended editions of the Lord of the Rings films that I always have been a very big fan of whenever a film has an extended cut. Only one time in my entire life have I thought an extended cut of a film was inferior, and that's the TV cut of King Kong 1976. But generally speaking, if I see a film and then I discover that there's an extended version, I just cannot go back to watching the theatrical cut. Like, I have tried to watch the theatrical cuts of the Lord of the Rings movies, and I cannot do it. Especially when we get to Return of the King, I'm going to have some choice words to say about its theatrical cut. But, and I should say, too, that like my dad, whom does still own these in his house to this very day, and I'm sure he has the same opinion, these are some of my most prized possessions. These are the versions of the film that I grew up with. And looking at these just instantly takes me back to when I was a kid, watching all of these films with my father and enjoying the living shit out of them. These are, I did buy these used. I think I got them off. No, I got the first two, Fellowship and Two Towers, from the same seller on Amazon. And the fronts look fine and the spines look fine, but he had put these damn stickers on the back, and obviously Fellowship's a bit scuffed up. But I got the spine on the inside is also a little scuffed up, especially on Fellowship. I think Fellowship's the one that is in the worst condition. Rings is, or Return of the King is a little scuffed up. This is the best looking one. So yeah, my personal history regarding Fellowship of the Ring. is, yeah, my dad brought home Fellowship of the Ring, the theatrical cut. We watched it. And then sometime later, when the extended edition was released, we sat down again and watched it and enjoyed the hell out of it. And I've been a fan of this series ever since. Now, I would like to also preface this by saying, now I am aware, of course, that the Lord of the Rings fan base is quite extensive. And the Lord of the Rings expanded universe is also quite extensive. And this may disappoint some people, but I am not what is known as a Tolkienite. I am not a uber diehard fan of the Lord of the Rings series. I've never read any of the books. I've never read any of the expanded material, of course, written by J.R.R. Tolkien. I am familiar with some of the book details, especially recently as I've delved more so into the lore. And I am aware that while all three of these movies, from what I've researched, are pretty solid adaptations of their source material, they, of course, did snip out a lot of details and still a lot of material from the books. But I mean, still, each one of these movies is 4 hours long. So I still think it was a very strong effort. And obviously, Peter Jackson and company were big fans of the source material. So, of course, they did do it justice, in my opinion. Oh, thank you. It's actually, where's, oh, here it is. It's a 7-Eleven shirt of all things, but it's kind of like a jersey, but it's nice. And my friend Charlene gave this to me. But anyway, so back to my personal history. Fellowship of the Ring. I think of the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy, this is the one that I've watched the most amount of times, because for a short while this was the only one that we had, and because it's a nice long movie that I could just put on anytime and enjoy the living shit out of anytime, any day, anywhere. I did watch this a lot when I was a kid, kind of to my dad's dismay and especially to my stepmom's dismay. Oh, but anyway, yeah, so to finish that up too, I probably will have a lot to say about these movies, so I do apologize if I come off as being a bit rambly and a bit all over the place, so just bear with me. And this is a franchise that, in general, I also have a lot to say about, but there is, in general, a lot to say about. So yeah, just bear with me. But yeah, I'm not a Tolkienite. I am not a diehard fan of the Lord of the Rings lore. I'm a big fan of the films, but yeah, I just have never had the desire to check out the books or any of the expanded material or expanded knowledge or lore. So that may disappoint some diehard fans of the Lord of the Rings films, but sorry. These are just movies that I grew up with, and they're the biggest thing that I have in common with my father, and there wasn't very much of that when I was growing up. So yeah, I do have a lot to say, and I have a lot of nostalgia, and I have a lot of special feelings for all these three movies. But yeah, I'm not a Tolkienite. I'm not a uber diehard fan of the Tolkien or Middle Earth saga lore. So just take that for what you will. And yeah, so Fellowship of the Ring. It's one of my favorite films of all time. It's one of my biggest comfort films. I can pop this on and instantly be transported back to when I was a kid. I also watched these a lot during a lot of summer times when I would, because when my mom came back into my life, I spent weekends over at her place, and I also spent summers over at her place. And well, we would alternate week to week. Like I would spend a week at my dad's and then a week at my mom's. And I'd watch these movies a lot just to pass the time. But yeah, Fellowship of the Ring is definitely the one that I have seen the most. So pardon Roman in the background. With all that being said, oh boy, let's get this show on the road. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, is a 2001 epic fantasy film directed by Peter Jackson from a screenplay by Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens, and Jackson himself. It is based on J.R.R. Tolkien's 1954 The Fellowship of the Ring, the first volume of the novel The Lord of the Rings. The film is, of course, the first installment in the Lord of the Rings trilogy and features a massive ensemble cast, including Elijah Wood, Ian McKellen, Liv Tyler, Viggo Mortensen, Sean Astin, Orlando Bloom, Christopher Lee, and many, many others. Set in Middle-earth, the story tells of the Dark Lord Sauron, who seeks the One Ring, which contains part of his might to return to power. The ring has found its way to the young hobbit Frodo Baggins in the process. The fate of Middle-earth hangs in the balance as Frodo and 8 companions who form the eponymous Fellowship of the Ring begin their perilous journey across Middle-earth to Mount Doom in the land of Mordor, the only place where the ring can be destroyed. The Fellowship of the Ring was financed and distributed by American studio New Line Cinema, but was filmed and edited entirely in Peter Jackson's native New Zealand, concurrently with the other 2 parts of the trilogy. Released on December 10th, 2001 at the Odeon Leicester Square in London, and was released December 19th in the United States, the film was critically acclaimed by both critics and audiences who considered it a landmark in filmmaking and an achievement in the fantasy film genre, with praise for the visual effects, performances, direction, screenplay, musical score, and faithfulness to the source material. On a surprisingly kind of low-ish budget of $93 million, it went on to gross 800, or which one is it? Oh, okay. Upon its initial release, it grossed $868 million worldwide, making it the second highest grossing film of 2001, right behind Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, which came out the same year. And it was the 5th highest grossing film of all time at the time of its release. Following subsequent reissues, though, it has grossed over $897 million. Like its successors, The Fellowship of the Ring is widely recognized as one of the greatest and most influential films ever made, and the film received numerous accolades at the 74th Academy Awards, being nominated for 13, including Best Picture, and winning Best Cinematography, Best Makeup, Best Original Score, and Best Visual Effects, all of which were most definitely earned. In 2007, the American Film Institute named it as one of the 100 greatest American films in history, being both the most recent film and the only film in the 21st century to make it to the list. And in 2021, probably to celebrate its 20th anniversary, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. 2 sequels, The Two Towers and The Return of the King, followed in 2002 and 2003, respectively. For this review, we will be specifically focusing only on Fellowship of the Ring. I may make a couple nods here and there to the next 2 films because it's really easy to talk about all 3 of these at the same time. Because, like a lot of other people, surely, I too do consider the Lord of the Rings trilogy to be just one big, giant, long movie, especially since they're so closely connected to each other continuity-wise. Like, I think a quick spoiler, or not really spoiler, but to make a reference to Two Towers, that movie takes place only 3 days after the events of Fellowship. And I think Return of the King roughly does about the same, but maybe 2, 3, or 4 days after the events of Two Towers. So even more so than the original Star Wars trilogy, all three of these movies are so closely connected to each other that it really is very easy to just group these together as one big long package. But for the sake of this review, because I actually did consider reviewing all three of these movies in one big, giant, epic, long video, but that probably would have been a massive undertaking. So I'll do this piece by piece. King Matthew the Third. Hello. So yeah, for this review and for the subsequent reviews, we will be focusing specifically on one installment at a time. Of course, starting with Fellowship of the Ring. Jumping into the plot, there's a lot to this. So, and I also, one more thing, I am not gonna be discussing the production of any of these movies, not even the Hobbit films. Partially because when I do plan on reviewing the Hobbit movies, but I really want to have Jackie Boy on board for reviewing the Hobbit movies. And the production details for those three movies is a gargantuan mess. But kind of like with King Kong 2005, the production and the road to getting these three films made was a very long, very arduous, and very complicated and messy documentary in and of itself. Like, hell, you probably could make a 5-hour long documentary about the making of Fellowship of the Ring alone. And hell, I'm pretty sure the appendices, the supplemental material and bonus material for these three films, which both of them, that's one big reason why these were released. Not just because they have the extended cuts, but because they're loaded with special features. If you want to know about the production, just track these down and check out the appendices. There you go. There's your production detail. Like, if I do find out anything about like the making of, or maybe a couple changes between the source material and the movie, or just like some fun tidbits here or there during the production of the films, I'll bring those up. But I'm not going to have a dedicated section to discussing the production and leading up to these movies getting made and released. Because, especially for all three of these, that is a gargantuan documentary in and of itself. So, sorry, that's just so much to discuss and so much to go over. It would have made this probably already a long review go on for even longer. But also, I'm just not familiar enough and knowledgeable enough with all of those details to really put those into a concise speech. There's just too much. So, sorry. Hold up. Also, pardon Roman in the background. Alrighty. So, jumping into the plot. In the second age of Middle Earth, the lords of elves, dwarves, and men each receive rings of power. Unbeknownst to them, the Dark Lord Sauron forges the one ring in Mount Doom, imbuing it with his power to control the other rings and conquer Middle-earth. A final alliance of men and elves battles Sauron's forces in Mordor. Isildur of Gondor severs Sauron's fingers, vanquishing him and returning him to spirit form, marking the beginning of the Third Age. The ring corrupts Isildur, who takes it and is later cut down by orcs. The ring is lost in a river for 2,500 years until it is found by Gollum, who possesses it for over 4 centuries, until it abandons him and is found by a hobbit named Bilbo Baggins. 60 years later, Bilbo celebrates his 111th birthday in the Shire with his old friend, Gandalf the Grey. He leaves the Shire for one last adventure, passing on his inheritance, including the ring, to his nephew, Frodo. Gandalf investigates the ring. Hang on one second. Let me just check on something real quick. Yeah, pardon Roman in the background. Yeah, Gandalf investigates the ring, learns its true nature, and discovers that Gollum was captured by Sauron and revealed 2 words during interrogation: Shire and Baggins. Gandalf warns Frodo to leave the Shire. As Frodo departs with his gardener friend Samwise Gamgee, Gandalf heads to Isengard to seek counsel from his friend, the powerful wizard Saruman the White. Saruman reveals Sauron has dispatched his 9 Nazgul servants to retrieve the ring. Gandalf immediately attempts to flee to warn Frodo, but is imprisoned by Saruman, who has allied himself with Sauron, communicating with him via a palantir, a crystal ball. Frodo and Sam join up with fellow hobbits Merry and Pippin to evade the Nazgul before reaching Bree to meet Gandalf, who never arrives as Saruman captures him. A ranger named Strider helps them get to Rivendell, but they are ambushed on Weathertop, the Weathertop Watchtower, by the Nazgul, who wound Frodo with a Morgul blade. Arwen, Strider's beloved elf, finds them, rescues Frodo, and takes him to Rivendell to be healed and reunite with Gandalf. Who had escaped Isengard on a great eagle. That night, Arwen declares to Strider she is willing to sacrifice her immortality for their love. Oh my god. Oh, early 2000s. Actually, sorry, but one more thing. Let me add to my nitpicks. Learning of Saruman's betrayal from Gandalf and that they are now facing threats from both Sauron and Saruman, their names are so similar. The only thing that's different is 2 syllables or 2 words, letters, literally. Arwen's father, Lord Elrond, holds a council of elves, men, and dwarves, also attended by Frodo and Gandalf, that decides the ring must be destroyed. However, Elrond explains that it can only be destroyed in the fires of Mount Doom, the volcano where it was forged. Frodo volunteers to take the ring, accompanied by Gandalf, Sam, Merry, Pippin, the elf Legolas, the dwarf Gimli, Boromir of Gondor, and Strider, who is actually Aragorn, Isildur's heir and the rightful king of Gondor. Bilbo, now living in Rivendell, gives Frodo his old sword, Sting, and a chainmail shirt made of mithril. an indestructible metal. The Fellowship of the Ring is forced to travel through the mines of Moria due to a storm summoned by Saruman. Gandalf warns Frodo that Gollum, released from Sauron's fortress, has been trailing them with the intention to reclaim the ring. They find the dwarves of Moria dead and are attacked by orcs and a troll. They have a cave troll. While they hold off the attack, they are pursued by Durin's Bane, a Balrog, a demonic monster. The others escape as Gandalf confronts the Balrog and falls into a deep chasm while battling it. The devastated Fellowship reaches Lothlorien, where Galadriel, the Elf Queen, tells Frodo that he alone can complete the quest and warns that one of his companions will try to take the ring. She shows him a vision of Sauron enslaving Middle-earth should he fail. Meanwhile, Saruman creates an army of Uruk-hai, essentially super orcs, in Isengard to destroy the Fellowship, intending to betray Sauron and claim the ring for himself. Oh, I didn't know that. The Fellowship travels to Parth Galen by river. That's a part of Gondor. As warned by Galadriel, Frodo is confronted privately by Boromir, who attempts to take the ring. Uruk-hai scouts ambush the group. Their leader, Lurtz, mortally wounds Boromir as he fails to stop them from capturing Merry and Pippin. Aragorn arrives and kills Lurtz, comforting Boromir in his final moments, promising to aid Gondor in their conflict. Worried the ring will corrupt his friends, Frodo decides to go to Mordor alone, but Sam insists on accompanying him, honoring Gandalf's promise to protect him. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli plan to rescue Merry and Pippin, while Frodo and Sam navigate the pass of Emyn Muil towards Mordor. Emyn Muil is also part of Gondor. Thus ending the movie on a not exactly a cliffhanger, but it's a solid to be continued type ending. So, what do I think of this plot? Well, to put it simply, it's epic. It is epic as fuck. Now, as I've stated, I've never read any of the novels, but I have done a fair bit of research. And I do know, well, this actually is one of my, it is kind of one of my pros. So actually, let me get into this. Pro number one is the story. The story is just outstanding. It's very original. It's very well detailed. It's very well thought out. It's very intricate, very captivating, fascinating, and entertaining and engaging. A lot of ing words, but it's just a fantastic story. It's a great start to the series. I do have kind of an issue with this being the start. You can kind of probably guess what that is if you know my recent videos, but just bear with me. The story is fantastic. It's very well told. It's very engaging. It's very captivating. There's so much that was thrown into this to make it feel so original. Like, there are some influences from previous, like, legends and various mythologies and fairy tale stories. Like, it kind of feels a little bit like Greek mythology a little bit, and it kind of feels like Beowulf or maybe a little bit of some Norse mythology there too. I actually think it's a little more towards Norse mythology in my opinion. Actually, Odin, like the general appearance and description of Odin, the king of the Norse gods, his appearance was kind of a big basis for how Gandalf was designed, especially in the stories in the books, and that's pretty obvious in his design here too. But yeah, the story is just, it's fantastic. Now, I wouldn't exactly say that this movie does function as a standalone film, but it still does function as, of course, a great introduction to the world of the Tolkien verse or the Middle Earth saga. It's a great start to a great franchise. It's very well made. It's very captivating and enjoyable, and just a fantastic, fantastic story. I can't get enough of it. I love it. So, cracking open the first burp fuel, Shasta Cola. Do I have a remote in here? Hang on. Sorry for all the interruptions. Oh, I gotta go change Roman's room or his movie. Hey, you being good in here? Huh? Oh, did you get your drink? Oh, what did you do? Hey. Hey. Roman, here. Okay. Oh, good now. Oof. Pro number 2. This will probably take a little while. Is the amazing cast of characters and the amazing cast of actors that they have portraying them. I'm not going to talk about every single character because this movie has a gargantuan amount of characters. But yeah, the cast is great, and the cast of characters are all, for the most part, fabulous. The biggest highlight, as far as I'm concerned, is, of course, Gandalf the Grey, voiced by the legendary Sir Ian McKellen, or played, I should say, by the legendary Ian McKellen. I love Gandalf. Gandalf has always been my favorite character of the entire Middle-earth saga. And it helps that, of course, he is played by one of my favorite actors, Sir Ian McKellen. Ian is perfect as Gandalf. His look, his voice, his personality, his mannerisms, his wit. I love Ian McKellen as Gandalf, and I just love Gandalf. He's a very wise, a very lovable, a very just enjoyable, fun, pleasant character. He can be, you know, loving and supportive and caring. He can be wise and authoritative and what's the word? Powerful, I'll say, for lack of a better term. He can be stern and harsh, I'll say, for lack of a better term, but in a good way. He's just a very likable, very selfless, very loving, powerful, entertaining, captivating character. I love Gandalf the Grey. He's my favorite wizard in all of fictional media. Jesus Christ, that scared the shit out of me. The hell was that? The fuck? That scared the shit out of me. Excuse me. Yeah, Gandalf is my favorite wizard of all time. In any movie, show, book, comic, anything that's fantasy related, and anything that has wizards, nothing tops Gandalf. Not even Harry Potter. Love Gandalf the Grey. Next is Aragorn, played by Viggo Mortensen. I also really like Aragorn. He's also a very likable protagonist. Um, some may see him as being kind of a boring blank slate, just kind of typical badass, every man, every like jack of all trades. I know everything. I can do anything kind of character. And yeah, Aragorn kind of is that kind of character on the surface. Um, but you can also tell, even more so as the series goes on, but even in this movie, you can tell that Aragorn's kind of a troubled soul. He, because he is the heir to Gondor, because it's explained in the film that after the death of Isildur, Gondor itself remained leaderless for almost 3,000 years. And Aragorn himself knows that he is the direct descendant of Isildur, and he knows of the legend of the ring. And when it comes to be in his vicinity, he kind of realizes that his destiny, quote unquote, his right to reclaim the throne of Gondor, is kind of starting to shove itself in his face, because he explains in the film that he doesn't want the power, he doesn't want the responsibility of being the king of Gondor. And he also explains one reason why is that he doesn't want to fall prey to the same temptation by the ring as Isildur himself, which, that's all well and good, but you can still be your own person and you can still make your own decisions. You're not destined to fall in the same steps as your ancestor from 3,000 years ago. But still, his trepidation and his hesitation to embrace his destiny, it is understandable and it is well explained. And of course, eventually, as the series goes on, he does overcome that and step into the shoes that he's supposed to be wearing. But yeah, Aragorn is a very likable, kind of like a It's kind of hard to like point out who the main character of this series is because there's so many that could be, but it's definitely a toss up. Like it's kind of a collection between Gandalf, Aragorn, and Frodo. But yeah, Aragorn is a very good protagonist. He's a very enjoyable character. um Viggo Mortensen does a great job playing him. He kind of has this air of quiet authority to him that I really like and I really respect. He's a great swordsman. He's a great fighter. He's very stealthy. He's very knowledgeable in sword and some kind of magic and healing and hand to hand combat and such. He knows how to live off the land and he knows how to stay hidden in plain sight, which is a all great traits. And like a lot of characters that I really tend to like, he's good at thinking on his feet, which he does a lot in this movie throughout the entire series. So I really like that about him too. Now, I will quickly say that really all of the characters, except for maybe Gandalf, I think I do like Gandalf best in this movie over all of the 6 Middle Earth saga films. But for the most part, all of the cast get better as the series goes on. But that's not taking anything away from anybody's performance in this first film. Everybody here gives a great performance and like they hit the ground running and they just keep going and going. As of course does Viggo Mortensen as Aragorn. He's really good, of course. And the rest of the cast, of course, we have. I'm not gonna talk about all of them, but I'll just give some big highlights. Next up, we have Legolas, the elf, played by Orlando Bloom. This was might be his first big movie. Yeah, it was the first big movie of his career of the 2000s. He was fucking everywhere in the early 2000s. Because he did the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and then he did Troy, and then he did the first 3 Pirates of the Caribbean films, all within the first 2001 to 2007. All these big multi-million dollar franchise installments in just 6 years. Like, oh, damn, he was a busy man during this time. But yeah. Orlando Bloom does a great job as Legolas. Legolas is another big fan favorite character of mine that I really do like. He's the sharpshooter, he's the archer, and he's really good with his iconic bow and arrow. I'll talk more about them as the series goes on, especially in Two Towers, where I think he shines best. But yeah, Orlando Bloom does great as Legolas. We have Ian Holm as Bilbo, old Bilbo. This was still quite a ways before Ian Holm passed away. He was fucking everywhere and throughout Hollywood. But yeah, Ian Holm is only in a few scenes in this movie, but he does leave an impact as Bilbo. And whenever I hear the name Bilbo, older Bilbo specific. Why do I say Bilbo? Shut up. Bilbo, excuse me, older Bilbo. Yeah, Ian Holm is iconic and synonymous with the name and character, of course. And Ian Holm was a fantastic actor, and he does a great job in this movie. We have Sean Astin as Samwise Gamgee. Beforehand, people knew him as Mikey from The Goonies. But these are the movies that I always think of. I love The Goonies. And I do like him in season 2 of Stranger Things. But as far as I'm concerned, his biggest career highlight is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I'm sure he'd probably agree too. Yeah, I like Sam. He's a good sidekick and serves as decent comic relief. And he contributes to a couple funny scenes, but I'll get to those a little later. We have the legendary Christopher Lee as Saruman the White, and he is awesome. He's awesome in this movie, and he's awesome in The Two Towers. But I do think Chris gives his best performance as Saruman in Fellowship of the Ring. It's Chris Lee. Come on now. His performance is iconic. His voice is iconic. His appearance, stature, mannerisms, dialogue is all iconic. All just sex for the ears. And Chris almost looks like he was born to play Saruman. Which is funny considering originally Chris auditioned to play Gandalf. And I don't know if Ian McKellen auditioned to be Saruman, but Peter Jackson decided to obviously go with Ian as Gandalf and Chris as Saruman. I think Peter made the right choice. Sure, there is a part of me that would have liked to see the actors be reversed for their roles. But I think Chris is better at playing villains, even though Ian at this time too was also playing Magneto in the X-Men films, which both these two actors were really busy around this time with several multi-billion-dollar franchises because they were Gandalf and Saruman in the Lord of the Rings. Ian was off playing Magneto in the X-Men series, and then just the next year, Chris Lee would be playing Count Dooku in Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. So I was seeing both of these two pretty often in a lot of movies in my early childhood. But yeah, of course, Christopher Lee does a great job as Saruman. And the rest of the cast overall does a phenomenal job. And we have a fantastic array of characters and actors here. Let's see. We have Gimli, Gimli the Dwarf, played by John Rhys Davis. I'm going to save him for The Two Towers because that's when I think his character really starts getting good. He's just kind of a supporting character in this movie, but John Rhys Davis does still do a good job. Merry and Pippin, I'll also save for later, but the actors playing them do a great job too. Liv Tyler as Arwen, she gives a good performance. This probably is her best appearance in the trilogy as well. She has good chemistry with Viggo Mortensen. Although I'll talk about something regarding that a little later. Who do we have here? Lord Elrond being played by Hugo Weaving. He does a phenomenal job. He too has kind of a subtle, quiet, authoritative demeanor and posture, but he's also very wise and very intelligent and very reasonable. And Hugo does a great job here. Yeah, probably his best performance here too. He shows up a couple times in the next two, but this is where I think he shines best. Sean Bean as Boromir gives a really good performance. This wasn't the first of Sean Bean's roles where he dies, but this is one of the biggest examples that kind of fed itself into the meme and cliche that surrounded Sean Bean for a long time. If you want a really solid actor and you want to give him a really solid over the top death, Sean Bean was the guy to go to, which of course he does have that in this movie. Boromir has a pretty over the top death, but I'll talk about that when I get to the action scenes. I guess that's about it for the cast, but David Bowie auditioned for Gandalf? What? Damn. I mean, that would have been kind of cool, but I mean, I'm still glad they went with Ian. But Anthony Hopkins and Christopher Plummer were also offered to play Gandalf. Anthony would have been kind of cool. Richard Harris also expressed interest in the part, but he was doing Dumbledore in the Harry Potter series. Sean Connery was also approached for the role, but did not understand the plot, and Patrick Stewart turned it down as he disliked the script. What? But he also may have had he was busy at the time doing the X-Men series as well as Professor X. Let's see. Is there any other cast members I want to talk about? Kate Blanchett as Lady Galadriel. She does a good job. Lucy Lawless was considered for that role, but turned it down because she was pregnant at the time. But she would later go on to regret the decision. Um, I guess the reason why Chris Lee was declined as Gandalf was because he was too old. I mean, yeah, because there's less physicality involved for Saruman, how he's utilized in this movie. But also, I also like to think that people were thinking at the time, yeah, Chris is just better for villains, and I'd have to agree. David Bowie also expressed interest for playing Lord Elrond, but I'm glad they went with Hugo. Ian Holm is good as Bilbo Baggins. Yeah, I guess that's about it. But yeah, the cast of characters are all fantastic. Um, Everybody gives a really solid performance. There's some great dialogue. There's some great lines. Some really good chemistry. Especially when the Fellowship gets together and they embark on their journey. I have a slight problem with this too, but like it's a great sense of camaraderie. Like a bunch of creatures from different races, technically elves, dwarves, humans, and hobbits, are banding together to fight a great threat, fight a great evil, and embark on a perilous journey to complete a perilous task. I like this sense of like we're not doing this for pride. We're not doing it for money. We're not doing it for any other reason other than we need to take this object. We need to complete this task in order to save the greater good and the greater world that we all live in. I really like that dynamic. And yeah, I love the cast, love all the actors, Love all the characters. They're all fantastic. They're all great. Now, as mentioned, some of them, actually quite a few of them, do get better as the series goes on. And I know I want to say, I know I said I want to focus just on this movie and individual films for individual reviews. It's so easy not to compare them, but I feel like that should be stated. Some of them do get better as the series goes on. But I also do want to say that 99% of the characters, they hit the ground running with this first film and their first performance. And so it's good from the get-go. So kudos there. Pro number 3 is the fantastic musical score. Holy shit. The score for this movie is phenomenal. The film score was, of course, done by Howard Shore, who is a Canadian composer, conductor, and orchestrator noted for his film scores. He has composed over 80 movies, most notably the scores for the Lord of the Rings films and the Hobbit films. And he is a consistent collaborator with David Cronenberg, having scored all but one of his films since 1979, and has also collaborated with Martin Scorsese on 6 of his movies. He himself has won 3 Academy Awards for his work on the Lord of the Rings trilogy, with one being for the song Into the West, an award he shared with Eurythmics lead vocalist Annie Lennox. But that's getting a little bit ahead of myself. But yeah, the score for Fellowship of the Ring is absolutely phenomenal. It was performed by the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, the London Philharmonic Orchestra, and the London Voices. And it is absolutely, again, just phenomenal. So much iconic music is showcased in this movie, especially for the early 2000s. Like, in my opinion, the score for this movie, this may be some big words, but the score for this movie and this trilogy, as far as big multi-million-dollar fantasy or multi-million-dollar franchises and fantasy franchises, it rivals Star Wars in terms of being so iconic. It's a very varied score. There's happy and hippie and exciting and lighthearted music all throughout the movie. There's dark and dooming and depressing and foreboding music all throughout the movie. There's great action music. There's great, quiet, suspenseful, foreboding music. There's loud. There's quiet. There's funny and sad. There's action and kind of scary music even here and there. Yeah, this is one of the most varied, iconic, and greatest movie scores for any film, especially from the early 2000s of all time. Howard Shore, again, he hit the ground running and he just kept getting better as the series went on. But the music in this movie is absolutely phenomenal. Probably my favorite piece of music is either the music for the Shire scenes or the theme for Isengard, that big, loud, booming trombone style music. Dun 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 dun. Yeah, that might be my favorite piece of music in the whole movie. Yeah, I love this movie's music. It's fantastic. Let's see. Pro number 4 is the amazing cinematography. This is one of the most beautifully shot movies of all time, in my opinion. Now, like I said, This movie was shot in. It was shot in New Zealand, the Arrow River in the Otago region of South Island. Uh, Wakapapa Ski Field, or the Tongariro National Park, was shot for Mordor. Waikato and Matamata was shot for Hobbiton. The Gardens of Isengard were shot in Harcourt Park in Upper Hutt in New Zealand. The Shire Woods were shot in Otaki Gorge Road in Kaipiti Coast District. Sorry if I butcher any of these New Zealand names, by the way. Let's see. Rivendell was shot in Kaitoki Regional Park, also in the Upper Hutt. Where was Moria shot? I guess it doesn't say. Oh, probably because Moria was a set, but we'll get to that a little later. Yeah, there was a lot of real location shooting shot through all three of these movies, and again, they do a great job showcasing the New Zealand landscape. New Zealand's a very green, very foresty and grassy country. I think I would love to either visit or live New Zealand, but live in New Zealand. Holy shit. Um, Yeah, I love how this movie's shot. There's a lot of really wide open shots showing off the New Zealand landscape, like the grass fields, the forests, the rolling green hills, the snowy mountainscapes. Um, all the sets look really good too, but we'll get to those a little later. They're all very well shot. They're very brightly lit. There's lots of bright greens, bright whites, bright yellows. A lot of very pleasant forestry, grassy landscapes showcased. Um, yeah, it's a very pretty film. It's a very well shot, very pleasant film to look at in terms of its camera work. Love the cinematography for this film. Peter Jackson definitely is an auteur when it comes to cinematography. Pro number 5 is Middle Earth itself. I kind of already talked about this regarding the film's story, but Middle Earth is a fascinating universe. It's so well detailed. It's so well showcased. It's very fascinating. It's very intriguing. It's very interesting. It feels big and huge and epic in scale. And I would not be surprised. I don't know when the Game of Thrones books were written, but I wouldn't be surprised if Game of Thrones took a lot of inspiration from Middle Earth. Same for Aragon, the Dragon Slayer books. Would not be surprised if those took a lot of inspiration from. Actually, Aragon in particular, I have read the first Aragon book, first three actually, and Aragon does feel very, very similar to Lord of the Rings. It doesn't help that the Aragon movie is very obviously ripping off the Lord of the Rings movies. Like, holy shit. Pardon, Roman. But yeah, Middle Earth is a very fascinating, very enjoyable, entertaining, and engaging universe. There's so much that's explored, and there's so much lore and world building that's done in just this movie alone. It's very captivating, very enjoyable, very interesting and fascinating, and just very. Oh, great! Shit, excuse me. Like, let's not. shit. Damn. Oops. Stay. Okay, excuse me. Sorry, Roman was being noisy. But yeah, I love Middle Earth. It's fascinating, and I love it. And that leads me into my next pro: is there's a great variety of fantasy and fantastical creatures. Of course, there's men specifically, but humans, just like in Star Wars. There's nothing really to say about them. But there's hobbits, which are kind of like dwarves, but they just look like miniature men. Like I do think there are some distinctive differences between hobbits and dwarves. Like hobbits specifically, they don't wear shoes. They have really hairy and really thick-soled big feet, and like their feet just are their shoes. They have heavily calloused soles, and that protects them from the elements. And also, they're so hairy that acts as like protection from their feet specifically. Protect they're so hairy, and that protects their feet from getting cold. The tongue tied, excuse me. There's elves, which kind of look like humans, but they have very smooth and very perfect features. Like they're all made to be as pretty and attractive as possible. Long, straight, flowing hair, bright green or blue or colored eyes. Very elegant and smooth and clean, pristine features and conditions. Um, Orcs are some of the ugliest motherfuckers you'll ever see in your life. I think there is a bit of a contrast between like angels and demons, between orcs and elves going on here. And orcs do look like demons out of hell. Black, gray, splotchy, reddish, brownish skin. They have black blood, which is one way that this movie is able to get away with being low-key kind of violent. Very gnarled, ugly, twisted, deformed features for the orcs. Not talking about the effects, although I'll get to that a little later. Uh, yeah, the orcs are distinctive, and of course the dwarves too are. They always have lots of hair, great big bushy beards. They're short too, but they're also very stocky and very kind of muscular and pudgy. Again, distinctly different from hobbits, which I really do like. So yeah, there's a great variety, and also there's, well, as the series goes on, but there's other creatures, like there's the Watcher, like some kind of octopus kraken looking monster. There's the Urukai, which I really do like. They're kind of like super orcs. They're taller, more muscular, and more, they're still kind of ugly, but they're not quite as gnarled and twisted and deformed. What else is there? Of course, there's horses, but those aren't fantastical creatures. But yeah, I just really like the variety of different fantasy creatures. Like it makes it feel very much like a typical fantasy type setting, and I like the variety that's showcased here. Let's see, what was that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that was pro number 6. I have 10, kind of 11 pros. But I'll go pro number 7 is there is some good humor in this movie. Actually funny, I do think the series gets funnier as the series goes on, but there's some good slapstick humor, namely from Merry and Pippin. They're kind of the two bumble and butt fucks. Like they're the Timon and Pumbaa of this series, and they're really funny. Like probably Funniest scene is when Merry and Pippin shoot off this giant firework that Gandalf has because he likes to shoot off fireworks. It's like this big dragon shaped missile, essentially. They light it off inside a tent and it shoots off and destroys the tent. And both Merry and Pippin are like covered in soot and ash and smoke. It turns into the firework turns into this big giant like fire dragon, and it just blows off as this big collection of fireworks. Excuse me. Merry and Pippin were like, "That was good. Let's get another one." And then Gandalf shows up behind them, grabs and pinches their ears, and they go, "Meriadoc Brandybuck and Peregrine Took. I might have known." And then the next scene, Gandalf's making them wash all the dishes from Bilbo's party. It's funny. Let's see, what's another funny moment? One that always gets me is when Gandalf learns that the One Ring is in Bilbo / Frodo's possession. He convinces Frodo to pack up his stuff and get the ring out of the Shire. When he thinks they're being stalked by like a spy or a scout, he grabs his staff and he like looks out a window and he smacks something and it's Sam. So he reaches down, picks up Sam and just flees him onto a fucking table. He's like, "Confound it all, Samwise Gamgee!" And for some reason, the way he yanks him out of the yanks him out of the bushes and onto a table, he just does it without even flinching. Just cracks me up. Throws him like a sack of potatoes. It's funny. Another funny moment from from Pippin. Let's see who plays Pippin. Da, 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 da. Oh, Billy Boyd as Peregrine Took. Pippin, better known as an extremely foolish hobbit. He is the main focus of this film's comedic relief because he's such a dumb bumble and buttfuck. As Gandalf's nickname for him is Fool of a Took. But one moment that always used to crack my dad up when they depart Lothlorien with renewed supplies on their way to Mordor, they're given lembas bread, as they call it. And Legolas talks about saying one small bite is enough to fill the stomach of a grown man. And Merry looks at him and says, "How many did you eat?" And Pippin just goes, "4." Excuse me. I don't know. It's a simple, stupid moment, but it's always cracked my dad up to this day. Another funny line is when they reach the gates of Moria. Gandalf's trying to figure out how to open the gates of Moria, and there's a riddle that says, "Speak friend and enter." Figuring, okay, we'll speak the password. So Gandalf tries to open it with various spells and magic, and it's just not opening. So then Pippin, just master of staying the obvious and dumb questions, just goes, "What are you going to do then?" Without even flinching, Gandalf just says, "Knock your head against these doors, Peregrine Took. If you'll provide me with some quiet and free me from such foolish questions, I will try to figure out the incantations to open the door." Something along those lines. And probably the ultimate example of how much of a bumble and buttfuck that Pippin is when he gives away their position in the mines of Moria. But I'll get to that in just a minute. Um, but yeah, there are some funny lines, and there's some goofy moments here and there, and they just get goofier and funnier as the series goes on. But it's a good start here. Excuse me. Let's see. Pro number 8 is the great production values. Now, surprisingly, like I mentioned, this movie cost only, well, I'm only in 2001 money, this was still a fairly big chunk of change. Um, but this movie only cost $93 million. All three of the Lord of the Rings movies cost just under $100 million a piece. And that kind of surprises me because of how good these movies look, and especially for the early 2000s. Like, you'd think that each one would have at least cost like 120, but maybe they did save a lot of money because they shot so much of these movies in New Zealand. So maybe Peter Jackson just knew. Excuse me. Excuse me, I got a nose hair that's driving me nuts. Sorry. Excuse me. So yeah, maybe Peter Jackson, just because he knew the terrain and he knew locations throughout New Zealand, he could have saved money on shooting them at. So yeah, maybe Peter was just good at either saving money or just using limited resources to his advantage. Well, he is one of those too. Although he can also deliver a solid movie when he's uh, given a big budget, like with King Kong and especially the Hobbit trilogy. Um, but yeah, for only a $93 million budgeted film, this movie looks fantastic. That's another aspect that goes into how this movie is able to look so fresh and fantastical, because they were able to funnel a bunch of money seemingly into like the clothing of the elves, men, dwarves, hobbits, orcs. Um, they make them all look very distinctly different. Even the various kingdoms and tribes within the various tribes of creatures, like, well, I mean, the elves of Lothlorien and the elves of Rivendell look fairly similar, but the elves of Rivendell, they look foresty, but they also look kind of like river-ish, because that's where Rivendell is kind of located. It's in a foresty area, but there's a big river that goes through it. The elves of Lothlorien are purely woodsmen, like they live in the middle of a very dense, thick forest. So their wardrobe and their color and aesthetic is very kind of brown or greenish brown. Same for the Rivendell elves, but again, there is still a distinct difference. But the dwarves, like their weapons and clothing and armor, look dwarvish. Um, the hobbits, they look like hobbits. Their clothing looks like hobbits. The orcs very distinctly look like orcs. The orcs are not pretty. They're just all about pragmatic and practical means. Like, that goes into their weaponry, that goes into their clothing and their architecture. It's not made to look pretty. It's just made to look functional. Like their weapons too, especially with the swords that the Urukai use. And that's one thing I do like, because obviously I've stated before, I'm a knife and sword nut, and I like that the weaponry of all the various tribes and creatures looks distinctly different. Elves are apparently stated to be like the best swordsmiths in all of Middle Earth. Like, not only do they make their weapons look pretty and practical, but they also make them to be very strong and very durable and sharp. Um, More so stated in the Hobbit movies, but here I think that is still showcased quite well. Yeah, their weapons are very sleek, very elegant, very agile, and pretty to look at. Um, the weapons that the men use, swords, knives, shields, a bow and arrow too, like it's functional and it looks clean and pristine, but it's not overly decorated like the uh, elves do to their weapons and clothes and what have you. Um, the dwarves are very rugged, also practical, but very rugged and very angular and sharp. And the weapons that the orcs use are very crude, very, again, kind of ugly and unpleasant to look at and wield, but they're purely practical. Like, again, the swords that the Uruk-hai use, they're not made to look pretty. They're just made to hurt people and kill people. Ooh, excuse me. Sorry. I need to trim my nose. Sorry. But yeah, going back to the production values and the distinct differences. Um, yeah, like the everybody looks different, distinctly different. It doesn't all blend together in this boring, bland fantasy world. Like the elves look like elves, the men look like men, the hobbits look like hobbits, dwarves, orcs, urukai, they all look distinctly different. And even the various tribes like the Shire, Isengard, Mordor, Rohan, Gondor, it all looks distinctly different and it all looks distinctly Gondor, the Shire, Isengard, Rivendell, Lothlorien, Erebor, to talk about the Hobbit series real quick. Yeah, it all looks distinctly different and it all looks fantastic, in my opinion. Again, a $93 million budget, which, again, that wasn't necessarily a limited budget for 2001, but still, Peter Jackson spent his money well and he utilized his money well in a way that still shows like this movie was a big budget, high profile film, but it punches well above its weight class in a very good way, in my opinion. So yeah, the production values are all great. All the sets as well look really good. I'll just go into this one next. Pro number 9 is the amazing special effects. Now, this was still during a point in time in Hollywood where Hollywood was willing to heavily hybridize practical effects and digital effects. So, as stated, all the costumes are obviously all real. Like the elves look like real elves. The dwarves look like real dwarves. The hobbits look like real hobbits. The orcs look fantastic. The Uruk-hai look fantastic. There's a lot of practical effects utilized, especially with the orcs. Lots of makeup and prosthetics and costumes that make them all look distinctly different, distinctly disgusting, and distinctly orc-ish. Like whenever I hear, I don't think orcs are a specific creature to the Middle Earth saga or the Tolkien verse, but whenever I hear the word orc, I just immediately think of the orcs showcased in the Lord of the Rings movies, as does many other people surely when they hear the word orcs. Yeah, the Uruk-hai also look really good. There's body paint, fake teeth, and prosthetics, and their armor also makes them look really good too. Um, for all the weapons showcased, like Gimli's axes, Legolas's bow and arrow, Gandalf and Aragorn and everyone else's swords, they were all real, like 9-10 pound aluminum swords that everybody had to learn how to use and wield convincingly. Duh, obviously. Viggo Mortensen in particular was very ooh, excuse me, was very attached to his sword. Like he learned how to use it and he insisted on carrying it everywhere he went when he was made up as um, Aragorn, like a real 9-pound sharpened sword that he used in this movie was real. Um, and same for Sean Bean. He learned how to use his sword as well. All the cast learned how to use their swords, and they all do a great job. But I'm talking about the effects. There's a lot of green screen effects too. Like there are a lot of digital effects. There's CGI used to showcase the various armies of orcs and urukai and men and elves in like the prologue and also some of the battle scenes in this movie. They're mostly CGI, like when they show off the great the realm of Dwerodelf in Moria, when orcs are invading that area, it's all CGI. But it's darkly lit. But they also do like a blending, like they have a bunch of extras made up to look like orcs. And then I think they digitally copied them at various places to make it look like, in reality, they probably had like maybe 100 or 200 extras dressed up as orcs, but they digitally multiplied them to be more like 600 or 700 orcs. A similar thing that they did in Gladiator, where they had, I think, like 2,000 extras, and they digitally multiplied that 2,000 extras into like 5, 6, or 7,000. So yeah, probably a similar thing done there in this movie as well, especially in the opening prologue scene when the elves and men attack Mordor. There surely were hundreds of extras made up to look like orcs, elves, and men, and then they digitally multiplied them. And even for the main cast, like when they're running throughout Moria, they use digidoubles or like digital stunt doubles or just CG animated doubles of the Fellowship of the Ring running throughout Moria. But they were smart and they shot them from very far away. So like you can tell that they're digital, but because they're far away and they're kind of darkly lit, they do blend in with the background. But also in shots where they use the digital doubles, they're mostly used in shots to show off the various landscapes that they're walking through, like the immense realm of Dwerodelf or the bridge of Khazad-dûm or the woods of Lothlorien, or just various areas where they wanted to show off the landscape, but they didn't want to get the actors in for whatever reason. They would use the digital doubles, and they look fine. I have a couple minor gripes here or there when I get to my nitpicks and cons, but yeah, for the most part, the special effects are all fantastic. All the practical effects are really good. The swords, costumes, armor, and weapons all look great. The makeup and prosthetics for the orcs and dwarves and even Gandalf all look really good. Poor John Rhys Davis had a hard time playing Gimli because the makeup and glue attaching his beard to his face would apparently rip up the skin on his face. So according to the commentary for Fellowship, for every day that John Rhys Davis had to be made up as Gimli, whenever they would remove the prosthetic beard, they had to give him 3 or 4 days rest and heal time for his face to readjust back to wearing that beard. And I guess they would remove a couple layers of skin, removing the prosthetic beard. So he got his face tore up quite a bit doing these movies. Anyway, yeah, all the effect. Oh, there's the Balrog too. Looks fantastic. It's all CGI, but it looks like a really cool monster. I have a minor issue regarding it, but the CG looks great. There's a lot of green screen shots. There's a lot of composite shots. Most of them look really good. Yeah, this is a very big, very ambitious, and very epic high fantasy type movie, and Peter Jackson did a great job showcasing this in terms of the effects. So yeah, big pro there. big pro there. And pro number 10 is pro number 10 is the great suspense, and pro number 11 is the fantastic action scenes. But I'll talk about the suspense real quick because there's really only one scene. Well, no, there's kind of two. Like when the Nazgul are hunting Sam, Frodo, Merry, and Pippin at the inn at the Prancing Pony and the road leading to that area. Oh, Bree, that's what it's called, town of Bree. There's some suspense there when the Nazgul are hunting the Four, and when Aragorn saves them from being skewered in their beds. There's a little bit of suspense there. But the main area of suspense, in my opinion, and the best scene in the whole movie is, to quote Gandalf, "We now have but one choice. Don! We must face the long dark of Moria. Be on your guard. There are older and fouler things than orcs in the deep places of the world." Um, it's a very huge, wide, sprawling mine, but because it had been abandoned and seemingly occupied by orcs for quite some time, it's a very dark, very dank, ugly, creepy, and claustrophobic area. And claustrophobic because it's so dark. The only source of light is from Gandalf's staff. There's a crystal in it that emits light, and also Boromir's one torch. That's the only light source throughout the entire mine. Other than that, it is pitch ass black. And Gandalf says they have to be quiet because it's occupied by orcs and goblins. They're trying to sneak their way through the mines of Moria undetected. And they get pretty. Sorry, my nose is driving me nuts. Oh. Ooh, I think I got it. They get pretty far. I think they get about 3 days into their 4-day journey going through Moria before they come across the tomb of Gimli's cousin Balin. Balin was a character from the Hobbit movies. They find his grave as he had passed away before the events of this film. And Gandalf comes across his diary or journal, and he hands his staff and his hat to Pippin, and he starts reading. And they come to learn that the orcs had invaded the mines of Moria and had hunted all of the dwarves down one by one before killing all of them off. And Pippin, the stupid bumbling buttfuck that he is, he looks over at a skeleton that's sitting on a well, and he just touches an arrow that was sticking out of it, and that causes the head to just lob off and fall down a big well. Oh, okay, so I guess this is a little different. Let's see. I guess in the book, Pippin tosses a mere pebble into the well in Moria. They then hear what sounds like a hammer tapping in the distance. Whereas in the movie, yeah, Pippin knocks the head off of a skeleton and it rattles its way down the well and then follows the rest of that body, and it's attached to a chain and bucket. And there's this. So keep in mind, they have been trekking through Moria for the last 3 days and making very little to no sound, sneaking their way through the mines and avoiding the goblins and orcs. And then Pippin's bumbling buttfuck ass gives away their position. There's this loud rattling, crashing, clattering noise that echoes all throughout the mines of Moria. And this really was lost on me a lot when I was a kid, but I imagine in theaters this scene like gave a lot of people goosebumps, as it did when I showed Meadow these movies back in 2024. And once the clattering subsides, it's dead silence from everybody. And then Gandalf punctuates it by going, "Fool of a Took, throw yourself in next time and rid us of your stupidity." I love the way Gandalf says that. Fool of a Took. And then a few seconds later, there's this loud boom, boom, and everyone starts looking at each other, and then the booming sound turns into drums. The orcs have been awakened, and they're coming for everyone's ass. And this will lead me into my final pro for this movie is the action scenes. The action scenes in this movie, not my favorite, but again, the fight scenes in this movie are all pretty damn awesome. So there's the opening prologue with the elves and men slaughtering orcs left and right. It's kind of a quick scene, but it's still very entertaining. It's well edited. There's great choreography. There's great swordplay on display. Orcs get cut down. Legions of both orcs and men get shot down with arrows. Excuse me. And yeah, it's all pretty entertaining. Kind of short, but pretty entertaining. Then there's Aragorn's fight with the Nazgul. One guy with a sword and a torch taking on 9 ghouls, essentially. But again, the choreography is really good. The sword play is really good. It's well edited, well shot, very entertaining. But the biggest highlight for me is the Battle of Moria, in my opinion. We have the entire Fellowship of the Ring, the one time the Fellowship of the Ring fights together. Everyone draws their Gandalf draws his sword. Boromir and Aragorn draw their swords. Legolas gets his bow and arrow ready. And Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin all draw their swords. And Gimli unsheathes his 2 axes, because that's a big thing for dwarves. Oh my. Is that they use a lot of axes over swords, like war axes. And they all get ready for the orcs to be breaking their way into Balin's tomb. Then when they finally break their way in, there's barely any music. They all start screaming and swinging and slaughtering orcs left and right. It's very well shot. The editing is very crisp and clean. There is some shaky cam, but I think it works because it's supposed to be a really chaotic and frenetic and frenzied scene. It works to its advantage, so I don't mind the shaky cam. It's not like Batman Begins, thankfully. And there's some good kills in this movie, namely from Aragorn. He likes to chop off heads as the series goes on. He does that quite a bit. There's one orc that the orc screams, and then he screams, and Aragorn just completely lobs off the head of an orc, and a big fountain of black blood spurts out. Boromir's cutting down orcs left and right with his shield and greatsword. Even Sam is cutting down orcs and stabbing them left and right and bashing orcs in the head with a frying pan. There's a little funny line where he's slashing and bashing, and he goes, "I think I'm getting the hang of this." And he just keeps on fighting. Gandalf too, he dual wields his staff and a long sword called Glamdring. Some of the swords in this series have names. Like Frodo's, all the elvish swords at least have names. Frodo's sword is Sting, as Bilbo names it in Desolation of Smaug. Gandalf's sword is called Glamdring. Aragorn's second sword, I think, is called Narsil, or the Sword of Elendil, and Thorin's sword is called the Goblin Cleaver. No, I can't remember that sword's name. I'll probably get to that when I get to the Hobbit. But yeah, all the fight scenes are very entertaining. Even Merry and Pippin get involved. They usually tag team their opponents, their foes. They push them to the ground and they just start stabbing and cutting the shit out of their foes. Like they do that to the cave troll. And they do that to the Uruk-hai at the end of the film, where they double team their foes and just cut and stab the shit out of them. Yeah, the Battle of Moria is the biggest highlight of the movie. It's a fantastic fight scene. It's very satisfying and entertaining just to see orcs get cut and slashed and squished and bashed and torn to pieces by these guys. Love it. And then, of course, the battle with the Uruk-hai at the end of the film. Boromir, Legolas, Aragorn, and Gimli, and Merry and Pippin cutting down the Uruk-hai left and right is also entertaining. The choreography is very good. The sword play is very good. Watching Legolas too just snipe Uruk-hai and orcs left and right with his bow and arrow, he just makes it look so pew, 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 pew. Is very entertaining and very satisfying. Yeah, I love it. All the action scenes in this movie, probably the smallest in scale for the trilogy. But like I keep saying throughout this review, they just keep getting better and better as the series goes on. But they do hit the ground running and they do start off strong. So yeah, I love the action scenes in this movie. Very entertaining, very well done. Couldn't have asked for better fight scenes. Well, except for one. I'll get to that in a few minutes. So with all these great things to say about Fellowship of the Ring, do I have any cons? Yeah, actually, I have a couple. And I have three cons, but I also have three nitpicks. And these nitpicks are very negligible. So I'm going to jump through these real quick. Nitpick number one, there is some cringy romantic dialogue between Aragorn and Arwen, and it feels right out of Attack of the Clones and Spider-Man, which both came out the next year. It's just very, very cliche, very cringy. Like, I would give up my immortality to be by your side. I cannot ask you to give up your life for your love for me, but I want to because I love you. Shit like that. That's not too far off from the actual dialogue in this movie between Aragorn and Arwen, and it is kind of cheesy, and it is kind of face palming at times. You're just like, oh my god, what is this? What is this bullshit? Just get out of here with that. It's kind of funny and it's kind of cringy in a funny way, but it's a bit dated. And the other two is there are some dated CGI and green screen and composite effects. The cave troll is kind of hit or miss for me. Sometimes the cave troll looks decent, and there's other times when the cave troll looks kind of cartoony. But I guess this was one of the first times where like a monster like this was showcased in the same vicinity with live live action characters in a movie like this before. So I mean, it is influential and notable for that, but there still are some shots where the cave troll does look a little cartoony. And there's a lot of shots where the CGI orcs do look kind of cartoony and a little dated. Again, the technology at the time was really solid, and showcasing armies of elves, men, and orcs like this hadn't really been done before. But still, this movie being 25 years old, it does show some, no pun intended, chinks in the armor. Not bad by any means, just a little dated. But moving right into my cons, this is a huge nitpick, but still, it is kind of a shame. I don't like the fact that the Fellowship of the Ring, the title of this movie, The Fellowship of the Ring, is only truly together for a very short time in the context of. Hold on. What? Shit. All right, I'll get to that later. Excuse me. Um, yeah, this is a huge nitpick. I don't like that the Fellowship of the Ring is truly together and fights together one time during the Battle of Moria. Right afterwards, Gandalf dies. In the context of this movie, he dies. We didn't know if he was being resurrected unless you read the books, which I didn't. Um, and then at the end of this movie, Boromir is killed, and Merry and Pippin are kidnapped by the Uruk-hai. And then Frodo and Sam abandon the group and go off to destroy the ring by themselves to Mordor. So the Fellowship is disbanded at the very end of the initial chapter of the series, and it's just kind of a shame because I like that dynamic and that sense of camaraderie between the entire team. Entire team. I wanted to see more of that, and I wanted to see like more scenes with the hobbits and Gimli working together, or all four hobbits taking down orcs by themselves. More shots of Aragorn and Boromir, two men of Gondor, working together because they have similar skills. Um, More scenes of well, we get more of that in the next movie, but more scenes of Gimli and Legolas fighting together because it's established in the Hobbit series that there's like a huge rivalry between dwarves and elves, and they get a little bit more into that in the Hobbit series, but they kind of allude to that in this movie as well. But still, they're kind of forced to work together, and I would have liked to see more of that. I just would have liked to see more of the Fellowship of the Ring working together. And we don't really get that. We do for a brief shining moment in this movie, and then it's splintered and disbanded by the end of this movie. It's just a little frustrating. Um, but yeah, that's just an uber nitpick. That's the least of my cons. Con number two, Gandalf's fight with the Balrog is kind of lame. We see this big giant fire demon. Hold on. Okay, excuse me. Yeah, we see this big giant horned dragon monster demon thing straight out of hell, and like seeing the second most powerful wizard in the Middle Earth saga take on this monster would have been really cool. But all he does is like surround himself in a sphere of light. The Balrog draws like a big fiery sword, destroys the sword and the sphere, pulls out a big giant fire whip, and then the Balrog kind of kills itself by stepping onto a narrow bridge, seemingly falling to its doom. And then it snags Gandalf and yanks him down the chasm. It's just kind of lame and a little disappointing in hindsight. I don't know if this fight was longer in the book. I don't know for sure. I don't think it was, but I've just never really found this fight to be all that engaging. Hold on. Excuse me. Sorry. Um. Yeah, never have liked the fight between Gandalf and the Balrog. And I know that they show more of it in the Two Towers, but even there they don't really show much of it in my opinion. So it just kind of seems like it was a big missed opportunity to see a wizard unleash its true power onto a big giant monster in the Middle Earth saga. It's just kind of frustrating. But the biggest problem with the Lord of the Rings, and this is not kind of like with Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, this may not be 100% fair to the film, but it also is kind of a flaw with the book as well. But the Fellowship of the Ring definitely does have first chapter syndrome. Now, with this movie being nearly 4 hours long, it's not as bad as something like, say, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which came out 2 years prior, or which something that came out this same year, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. But so it's not as bad, but this movie does feel like the first part of a multi-part series. There's a lot of exposition, there's a lot of world building, there's a lot of lore dumps, and there's a lot of setting up for the rest of the journey to come that takes place in this movie. Same case happened surely in the book as well. But the book probably surely does have this issue as well. So I know it can't be helped, but now, and it's also not as bad because the lore dumps and the exposition and the backstory and all that setting up is engaging and fascinating because the world is so original and you're so enamored with the world of Middle Earth. It's not as bad, but still, if you want some kind of epic medieval fantasy, like elves and men, sword and sorcery, cutting down monsters and wizard duels and all that, this movie does have that. But compared to the next two films, this does have the least amount of what you want to see in an epic high fantasy medieval sword and sorcery film. Now, it's not a huge problem necessarily, and it can't be helped because this is the first part of the story. It still is an inherent flaw, or not really flaw, but it's an inherent problem that this film can never escape. But still, it's not a huge problem necessarily. And with all that being said, Jesus Christ. Sorry for all the stuttering and all the interruptions, and also for the glitch that I had. Beg your pardon. So, with all that being said about the Fellowship of the Ring, this still is one of my favorite films of all time. It's a great start to a great trilogy of films. It's a great adaptation of surely a great book. It's an amazing, epic sword and sorcery fantasy film. It's just a great, epic, entertaining as fuck movie. And I love it. I love this movie. It's one of my favorite films of all time. And I'm going to give this movie a standard 10 out of 10. I highly recommend this movie. If you have not seen The Fellowship of the Ring, what the fuck? Especially if you're a Game of Thrones fan, why have you not seen The Lord of the Rings? Come on now. Get out of here with that bullshit. Yeah, 10 out of 10. Highly recommend. It's a great film, great start to a great trilogy. Go check it out. And as always, look forward to reviews of the next two films in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And hopefully I will have some guest appearances for the rest of it. And as always, go out, and if you find a gold ring in the middle of a dark, dank cave, well, I mean, I would say don't touch it, but it may be an all-powerful, all-evil piece of hellaciousness. So you may want to pick it up and haul your ass to a volcano to destroy it. And I will see you guys in the next video.